Today for Full Album Friday, we're going back to 1989 to look at one of my all-time favorite records, Paul's Boutique by the Beastie Boys. Now let's be honest, there is not a bad Beasties record out of there, but this one has always been my favorite from the first time I heard it. But what most people don't know about this album is the history behind it, because by this point, the Beastie Boys were on a self-imposed exile in Los Angeles, and most music critics had written them off as a one-album wonder after License to Ill. So that reality in a lot of ways freed up the Beastie Boys to do an album however they wanted to do it. And this is the record that really begins to show how much raw musical talent and vision these three had. Another interesting note is the fact that when this album didn't explode out of the gates when it was first released, the label pretty much stopped promoting it entirely. But even without that, in the underground, the album grew and grew, and these days it has an absolutely iconic status. There's just so much sonic and lyrical variation all across this album that it's tough to top on almost every level. But all of this came at a massive cost, as leading up to the record, the Beastie Boys got in a huge disagreement with Def Jam Records, and they were eventually dropped from the label. It basically came down to the fact that the label wanted them to do another License to Ill, and the group really had no interest in redoing what they'd already done. So they eventually found their home with Capitol Records, and the great Rick Rubin was replaced as a producer by none other than an up-and-coming duo known as the Dust Brothers. This record holds its iconic status for a number of reasons, but one of the big ones is because there's more than 100 different samples used on this album. And on the final track alone, there's 24 different elements being mixed together. Yet it's that balance and the brilliance that you hear in every single corner of every single song that shows what a great team the Beastie Boys and the Dust Brothers really were. There's just this energy and focus running throughout the entire album that you really need to experience firsthand to properly appreciate. And along with this, the three MCs show a ton of different vocal approaches on this record. As they pass verses, they pass rhymes, they pass words at times. And it shows a musical connection between the three that has never been equaled. The Beastie Boys also go for a much harder edge on this album compared to their first album, and you can really see them doing this on purpose to get away from the frat boy image that a lot of people like to stick on them after License to Ill. This also goes through to the lyrics because they're a lot deeper, they're a lot more socially aware, and they're just a lot more diverse. And when you listen to the stylistic talent in every aspect of this record, it makes it clear that this is the record that cemented the Beastie Boys as true hip-hop legends. On a personal note, this album has Eggman and Shake Your Rump on it, and those are probably my favorite two Beastie Boys songs of all time. But this is also the record that has a ton of musical lore in it, as it's widely believed that none of the 100+ samples that the Beastie Boys used on this album were actually cleared, and that it was Paul's Boutique that led to massive changes in sampling laws. But this isn't true, it's just myth, really. Almost every single sample on this was cleared before they used it, and they were able to use so many samples because at that time, rates were much lower for sampling in music. Any way you want to slice it, Paul's Boutique is a true musical masterpiece, and it needs to be played on a very regular basis. And if somehow this album isn't in your collection, you need to change that right now. Thank me later.